Okay. Streaming is live.
Awesome, thank you. Folks, hi everybody. Welcome to our June meeting of the Athens Cultural Affairs Commission. Why don't we kick things off by reviewing and approving our April minutes. We didn't meet in May, so that was our last full monthly meeting. First of all, are there any additions or changes that need to be made to April's minutes? Okay, in that case, can I get a motion to approve?
I so move.
Okay. Okay, and I see B approving, Victoria seconding.
Yeah, I'll
So
second.
all in favor of approving our April minutes as is.
Aye.
Looks unanimous. Okay. Any nays? Great. So why don't we start by welcoming a new commissioner. We have a new commissioner here joining us today onward, and that is Kimberly Davis. Kimberly, do you want to introduce yourself for 30 seconds? Just tell us big picture who you are.
Hi, everyone. You can all hear me?
Yes.
Me and WebEx are not friends, so I apologize. Kimberly Davis was born in Athens, lived a lot of different places. I currently work for the American Academy of Religion at Emory. I serve on the board of the Morton Theater Corporation, and I'm incoming president of Historic Athens. Glad to be here.
Great, thanks for that. And we have another new ex officio member as well. Jesus couldn't make it today due to a work conflict, but he's already dug into the outreach meeting and will be active. He and Kimberly both will be active in that committee. So welcome both of you. And yeah, we had our orientation session last week, myself and our two new members. I'm going to invert the order and give an update on our county's budget request. It was nearly approved. We were a little brash with our operating budget. We asked for a 114% increase year over year. We were granted a 95% increase from one year to the next, which is still quite good and something to be proud of. And so our operating budget will be increasing from 21,000 to 41,000 moving forward. And the bulk of that, of those revenues will be to facilitate our arts and community awards at an increased award amount of $5,000 each. Without us asking for it, yet again, our capital budget was increased from 25,000 to 40,000. Maybe we should start asking for those things. And so that's a $15,000 increase from year over year. And I assume the budget is fairly static. The final decisions have been made for the new fiscal year starting in 3 weeks. So that's another feather in our cap. So yay us. To the next point, we need to identify spending priorities in a non-binding manner at our retreat. And so I would like to revisit those, not today, but Darcy will get into that in her portion. Well, is Darcy here? I don't see Darcy. Okay, so oh, Darcy, I see you. Sorry. Hidden in plain sight. So to identify spending priorities, however, I think it does make sense as a forerunner to that, to go ahead and start codifying task forces. That's something else we discussed at our retreat. And our public art master plan gives a good definition. I'll just give a poor paraphrase. Task forces are meant to scale our work by bringing other people into a more siloed cause or initiative. And according to the public art master plan, and again, there's like a page just on task forces, they don't need to meet forever. So they're fairly short in duration, and they don't need to be necessarily monthly even. The task forces can meet and decide for themselves how they want to function. And Mickey and Serena have been like piloting our task forces specifically for bike related things. And they gave an overview of what they've been up to at our retreat a month ago. And so at our retreat a month ago, if you remember, we proposed some task forces. Everybody had a couple stickers so they could sign up for a couple. And I've made a summary of what we didn't decide, what we suggested at the retreat. Because again, we weren't voting on anything at the retreat, so none of that was really binding. Although perhaps we can decide and vote on what task forces we want to prioritize today. Okay, so do you all see my screen? And is it big
Yeah.
enough? Okay,
No,
Can you make it a little bit bigger, please, Andrew?
big
yes.
enough.
There
Thank
we
you
go.
very much.
Okay, so task forces, we proposed, and again, if you guys have any other suggestions, feel free to shout them out. So we recommended all kinds of things, just in alphabetical order. Artist residencies, where we had Madeline and Serena sign up. Bikes, where Mickey and Serena have been, and nobody else proposed to add their name to that list at our retreat. And again, task forces, we can bring other people in. So as Mickey and Serena suggested, for the bikes related task force, we could bring in people from Bike Athens or Athens in Motion, and other organizations that are where our missions align, where the mission of the task force aligns with the mission of the organization or the individuals. We proposed redrafting our bylaws at the task force level, with Donna, Ezra, and Marilyn putting their names in that hat. The Jackson Street Art Walk, where we had Darcy, Helen, Marilyn, Linda. Monuments, myself, B, Donna, Kimberly, Mickey. Murals, Darcy, Helen, Jan, Kimberly, Montu, Victoria. Music related things, myself, Ezra, Madeline, Montu, Serena. Party bus, just B. Maybe that doesn't need to be a task force. Maybe that work can get done at some other level.
Right.
Perhaps a subset of our outreach committee with B's Edition or some other group altogether. And then economic development and tourism with myself, Victoria, Jesus, if needed. And so this is what we proposed at the retreat. I welcome any discussion now.
So if we're starting with identifying task forces before, like, is this how we're going to set our strategic priorities for the next fiscal year or the next couple years? Because I think several of us, you know, just from my conversations at the retreat, we were expecting to kind of walk away with that with a little bit more of a high level, like, here's our strategic focus area. Now let's think about maybe through task forces, like how we could deliver against this like focus. And so to me, this feels like a little bit of an inverted way to do that. So I just kind of want to get clarity on the process and like how these pieces fit together. And yeah, just, does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a fair question. And you know, in some respects, maybe we are putting the cart in front of the horse by deputizing task forces before spending priorities. That said, maybe the task forces can guide our spending priorities, and maybe if a task force is able to meet before our next monthly meeting or a couple meetings from now where we discuss spending priorities more granularly, having met as an autonomous task force can guide those next steps. And one thing I left out, as Mickey and Serena are co-chairs of the bike task force, I think our task forces should function in a similar manner where we have a chair, if not a chair, two co-chairs. And I am happy to deputize those as chair myself. Or we can decide amongst ourselves who we want the chair or co-chairs to be. Other discussion.
I heard Madeline ask, and Madeline, forgive me if I'm wrong, but you did say something about, is this part of like a strategic priority over the next 2 years, or how will these task forces work exactly? Is it a task force in perpetuity? Is it a task force for the next year, the next 2 years?
Right. As defined in our public art master plan,
I'm sorry.
yeah, the task forces don't need to meet indefinitely, not in perpetuity. They can decide amongst themselves, and maybe the duration of the task force might go hand in hand with our funding priorities. That said, when it comes to funding priorities, we have enough discretionary budget power right now to really fund any and all of the funding priorities that we identified at our retreat. Why don't I just identify those at a high level? And then again, I would like to, Darcy and I talked, and it makes sense to discuss actual funding priorities in a more dynamic conversation that would be a lot easier in person. So hopefully as soon as next month. So we voted, if you recall, we had 3 different color stickers signifying first, second, third votes for 2 areas, capital spending and programmatic. So for capital, the winner were murals or Mural Fest spending priority. And then with about half as many points, we have monuments, bikes clustered together, and Jackson Street Art Walk, and an African American and Latino engagement plan that's an addendum to our own public art master plan. So those were recommended as capital, and it's a little confusing that an addendum to our public art master plan would be under capital, not programmatic. But we do have that flexibility in our budget for a one-time expense that pertains to capital investment like this addendum would. And then again, high level, on the programmatic side, the first cluster, having an Artistic Business of the Year award that we administer annually or however frequent, a signature cultural arts event, an Athens Music Walk of Fame ambassador, and then a slightly distant fourth is business art related workshops for that pertain to local businesses. And then at the tail end, artist residencies, a lecture series, a more specific artist residency that Deborah Gonzalez, our district attorney, discussed, and then again the party bus concept. And for each of these, I went ahead and suggested. You'll see murals. This column here, recommended task forces that correlate to each of the spending priorities. So each spending priority, if we go in the directions that we identified at the retreat, each spending priority would map out fairly cleanly to a task force. Okay, back to our task forces.
Can you go back to that other one on that other slide or sheet? Thank you. And can you zoom in? Sorry, I'm like, I guess I could wear my glasses. That would help.
Programmatic or capital?
Go to, let's see. So this is the capital one.
Okay.
And you recommended. Okay, and then can you go to the programmatic one? Well, just kind of saying this for the first time, the thing that comes to mind is let's see, art to business workshops is a part of the economic development tourism And then the Artistic Business of the Year Awards is a part of the Economic Development and Tourism. We've already talked about in outreach, we are identifying like strategic focus areas, and we're in the process, I'll report on this later, of coming up with like, what can we do to deliver in this area? And we want to align with our, spending priorities for the year. So we're just in the drafting phase of that, but we have talked about in that committee already, really focusing on business partnerships, which, I kind of see that as just like, I just wonder, like, do we need a separate task force for economic development and tourism that would take on those projects, or could that just be a part of outreach, since we just have already been talking about that in that committee? I don't know if that's a decision you're making now, or just,
Yeah, that doesn't
we've
mean
already been talking about it.
We're not voting on spending priorities this month, and
Right.
hopefully as soon as next month we are. We don't need to decide this today, but that's good food for thought. My thinking when I drafted this was outreach I already tasked outreach with, 4 of our 8 programmatic capitals, and then 1 of our 5 capital spending priorities. So that felt like enough to me for an outreach committee I don't serve on. But if outreach wants to take a bigger lift, um, I'm sure that could work if outreach wants it to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm the only one, but I guess I'm very process minded. So I just keep getting stuck on the, like, I would just love it if we could say, like, let's focus on the, like, economic development and business as a whole. And like, here's all the different ways we could do that. Like, maybe it's a award, maybe it's a white paper that Helen can research and write, or maybe it's yada, yada, yada. So I don't know if there's like a good way to share those kind of higher level thoughts, maybe like a Google Doc between now and the next meeting, just to kind of look at like all the things that we're putting, all these ideas we have, and how they could maybe fit together. Because that might honestly, like, just to avoid some overlap, or like even what we're talking about between, should this be an economic development separate task force or project, when like to or should it be outreach, just to duplicate and like kind of align on what we're talking about. And I don't know that we have the bandwidth to do every single one of these ideas we came up with either. So I wonder, could we take this and like chew on it over the next month before the next meeting, and try to kind of align and just a few more kind of like focus areas? I don't know if that doesn't make sense to other people. That's all good, but
Sure. It was my intent just to share this document here so that I could explain it as needed, as y'all are seeing it for the first time, and then share it out after our meeting.
Great.
As food for thought for us to chew on before our next meeting.
okay, that sounds great.
Can I throw out 2 cents?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. However, we develop the economic development / tourism piece, whether that's a task force or an ongoing task force or whatever, and whoever is a part of that, we're going to need that when we begin to initiate steps towards a mural fest. So it's going to be very vital overlap that that we're going to use that information and use those connections and be able to rely on the knowledge base that we will gain from that task force to help generate the Mural Fest to a successful place. So yes, Madeline, there will be some overlap as smart as, and we will need that overlap in order for us to kind of, walk and chew gum as it relates to a successful Mural Fest. So I think it's a strong task force.
So again, my vision for how task forces work is that we will carve out time at these monthly meetings where each task force that met that month can update the full group on their progress. Maybe we'll need to sort out how that works. If we have 9 separate task forces, they probably won't all need to meet up starting, now. But we'll need to figure out a way to carve out time. Maybe each task force, if they meet that month, gets 2 or 3 minutes. So that will obviously add time to our meetings, but hopefully we can reduce time, maybe at our project reports or elsewhere, since we do get weekly updates from Tatiana that encompass most of our project updates. Other thoughts?
I agree with Madeline. This is a great list to start with, but it is a pretty large list, and I think the next thing we need to do is talk about priorities and a general timeline of where these things fit into our funding cycles. So I think that was a good suggestion Madeline had.
So how about this? If getting task forces going now seems premature before we voted and decided on spending priorities, do we hold back on getting the task forces going until we've voted on spending priorities?
Well, do we need a spending priority to tackle the bylaws? I don't know if that's a.
Yeah, let's get going on our bylaws. No need to wait
I mean,
there.
that's something that may not even be a part of a spending priority, so we can get that off and running.
I was going to suggest maybe it would make sense for us to separate committees from task forces. As far as I can understand, task force is geared specifically for projects that we're going to be producing and that we're going to be navigating in terms of like the budgetary issues and so forth, as opposed to committee work, such as the outreach committee and the strategic committee, and I think the bylaws committee should be a part of that, are more tactical and need-based processes that we should be thinking about, perhaps. So maybe decoupling bylaws from the task force and making it a committee, and maybe defining the relationship between committees and task forces would be a better way to move forward. And I do agree. I would second the idea of coming up with our priorities for spending first before deputizing the task forces, so that, as Madeline said, we're not duplicating work or we're not coming up with ideas just to understand that it's not going to happen, in 2 or 3 years' time. I think it would be helpful perhaps to get that priority first and then decide how we want to divide it up between task forces.
I agree. And I'll add to it, and this may just be in the weeds, but I do like the idea of looking at this and kind of seeing how it bubbles up for all of us, because I think we all look at this kind of stuff differently. I almost look at it as what are the kind of the 3 primary efforts over the next 18 months or whatever. And one might be, building deeper relationships with the business community. Period. Like that, this is a group that wants to build deeper relationships with our business. How are we doing that? Awarding the business, beautiful. Then it becomes a little more palatable in language too. We want to explore a monuments initiative. What does that look like? I don't know. There's just, I think it'll start bubbling up because I think there's overlap here, and I don't know. I like where we're heading, and this is really having this as a visual is really helpful for me to kind of think about what is the real story we're trying to tell. If we were doing talking points out to the community about this is what our goals are for the next 2 years or whatever, and then this is how we're going to support those goals with task forces and committees.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's so helpful. And you're so good at that. I mean, you're a professional with how do we tell the story and how do we get people on board and understand all of this complicated behind the scenes stuff. So I really appreciate that. I also think, like, looking at it through that lens, if it's easy for people on the other side of us to understand, I just really think that's also going to help us to think about what would be the most effective in those areas. So like, is it not to beat a dead horse, because I love all of these ideas, but like, is it an artist business award, or is it something else with the business community or something? And we can start to, if we look at that, like that example that Victoria shared, as that's our, our focus area, we can weigh against these different ideas of like, which one of these is going to, over the next 18 months or whatever we're talking about here, which one of these will kind of go the furthest, fastest, and make the biggest impact and be easy for people on the other side of us to understand, because we just can't do it all. So I think all this can work together. So Andrew, you're saying you're going to share this document. I love a comment feedback type of thing. Could we do something like that with this, or would we want a separate or just an email thread, or how could people share sort of our feedback about all of this? Question for Andrew.
I'm indifferent to format, but a Google Sheet that people can comment on seems like that might work, and that might be a better way of archiving comments than an email thread would be.
I think it might be useful for, for each of these task force / committees to get together and sort of start to outline what all the goals and objectives and some potential timelines might be for each one of these, so that we can kind of understand a little bit more, what are we doing now with the Jackson Street Art Walk? I think there's a huge long timeline with that one, and the immediate needs are maybe not as pressing as some of the longer term needs. And for example, the Mural Fest, that might be something we really want to strategize and work a little bit more collectively harder on in the near term rather than in the long term. So maybe each task force could kind of outline goals, objectives, and what are all the actions, the types of action steps that might be related to each one of these, and then start to put all that together and start to see what we can actually accomplish in the next 2 years. Because like somebody said, do we have the bandwidth to do all this? I'm not sure we can do murals and monuments and art residencies all in 1 year, so how do these timelines kind of fit together so that we can actually get something accomplished year 1, year 2, and so on and so forth? And I think at some point the commission needs to figure out what is the priority for fiscal year 22, fiscal year 23. Is it going to be murals? Is it going to be monuments? Is it going to be residency? See what all the action items are that we need to have manpower to do, and then figure out what our priority, and let the priorities come out of that. So I'm probably babbling a little bit, but I think it'd be worthwhile for the groups to meet and start to articulate and define what each task force is trying to achieve.
Yep.
You're suggesting before we vote on the funding priorities next month, let's go ahead and meet in this provisional space to just kind of flesh out what it could be, and then maybe we could review those notes maybe in this document, or talk about it at the meeting before we vote.
Yeah, and we need to understand what the timelines are and what the funding needs are, and what the kind of personnel, I don't know what the who all needs to be at the table to do all this stuff. So kind of making these manage these a little bit more in a draft form, so that we can start to understand what we're talking about when we say Mural Fest or Party Bus or bike rack, all that stuff has a list of action items and outcomes that I think we need to have a better idea of what all those are before we can really prioritize and make decisions about funding and timelines.
Absolutely.
So what I'm hearing is there's no perfect time to get started.
Well, I think each task force should meet in the next month and start getting into this, and maybe, in 3 months we have put it all together and see what we've got.
I agree, Helen. I think it's hard to decide what our funding priorities are going to be if we don't know the scope of the work of these task forces. And so if we were to get started and understand a little bit more about what will go into each of these tasks, quote unquote, then it'll be much more fruitful in our discussion of funding priorities and strategic priorities.
Okay, so we can decide this by vote if we need to. I'm indifferent. As y'all know, I'm not the world's savviest process person. So y'all tell me, make a motion if you'd like to vote on it. A couple notes first. We talked about bandwidth, and the intent of the task forces, once task forces are established, as our public art master plan says, we can bring other people in. And so a task force should be chaired as the master plan prescribes, can be chaired or co-chaired, should be chaired or co-chaired by a member or a commissioner or an ex officio member of the Athens Cultural Affairs Commission. We can bring other people in, and maybe half of the body's composition, as much as half, could be external. Now, if we're not going to decide priorities now, maybe let's just meet with these task forces as they're laid out here with just us, and keep it internal for now on a provisional basis. And then once we identify spending priorities, then our task forces get real, and we can bring external stakeholders in at the task force level.
Yeah, and we could even let some task forces may not need to be meeting or doing that much in the next year or so. I mean,
Right.
and maybe they gear up a little bit in another year.
Yeah, just as an example, economic. As I was laying this out, I had the same thought, Helen. It might not make sense. You're putting the cart in front of the horse if all these task forces start meeting at once. Does it make sense to have an economic development and tourism task force right off the bat, when arguably these other task forces fall in that space? And maybe the task force can help us connect the dots once we have a few more dots to connect.
I do think it's important too for all of us in the next month, or as we think this through, is to kind of think of that big umbrella that these fall under. So, I mean, I'll kind of keep challenging us to think about the language of the music task force being something like our goal in the next 24 months is to elevate music, the art of music as part of our programming. How are we going to do that? Activating the, music walk of fame with an ambassador. I mean, I think we have to frame it a little bit, because there's going to just be some overlap. And as we think about recruiting folks for this task force, it's just going to be an easier talking point to say, these are the 5 things we've identified. And then these are the ideas underneath those. I don't know. I'm going to keep kind of going back to that. I think it's going to make it a little easier it's just going to make it more palatable.
I will say that when I was on the group that started the Rename Grady Task Force, we had a great sort of template document that helped sort of form that task force and the discussions that talked about the purpose, objectives, and all those kinds of things. So if we all can get some type of template that will guide us, like this is like the document that we'll have that will show what each task force is doing. And then that will not only help guide our discussion and figure out what we want the end result to be, but it'll also serve as a template for new task forces and for people who are not on the AC who would be external members. And so if we were to find something like that or create something like that, that would be really helpful. And I think the idea, Victoria, you know, you talk in your work and you certainly talk to the Morton board about the importance of story. There definitely needs to be a strong narrative of what we're doing so that we can tell the story of it to whoever is outside of the commission.
I love the idea of a templated sort of thing. So I do think that kind of drives us all back to purpose. We have
Right.
a music task force. Why? Because it's a goal of ACAC to incorporate music more loudly, blah, 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 whatever the language is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a template is a great idea.
I like that. And why don't I throw the ball in the court of the strategy team for the next time we convene? Why don't we get started in that forum on templates?
Okay.
Yeah,
And
I
the
like that.
strategy team,
At
y'all
minimum,
meet,
every task force should have its own goal statement.
and the task force, just for clarity, the task force, sorry, the strategy team, so many teams. The strategy team meets the first Tuesday of the month, is that right?
First Tuesday.
Okay, perfect. So if you guys are gonna work on that, then Andrew, is your advice here to go ahead and meet provisionally in these groups before the next meeting, or do you want to wait until that template is done before any of these
I don't think
groups have their preliminary?
I don't think it'll do any harm to meet once provisionally, just to have a sense of, you know, you get a bunch of people in a room on one cause, and then a lot of things become more clear, including, does the timing make sense at all? So I like the idea of having a provisional meeting, if at all possible, for each of these before we connect at our July meeting.
Then could you, I put this in the chat, but just in case you didn't see it, would you be able to just delegate, you know, who's going to organize each of the, like just delegate a sort of, at least just provisional temporary sort of chair or something to just organize all of those?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
What do you have in mind?
Oh, I just mean, so you have the list of everybody who's interested. If
Yes.
you could just or what's the word, designate one person in each of those groups to be the person who organizes each of those meetings, I think that would just
Yeah,
make it
I'll do
a
that.
good barrier to lift, so we could do it.
Apologies in advance. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and deputize a chair or maybe two co-chairs for each of these task forces. Let me know, let's say by Friday, if you don't want to be that person. Otherwise, I'll assume that you do. And I'll lay that out in the email that I send to this effect. Cool. Anything else? Okay, great. Darcy, I know I already covered most of the things that we said we're going to discuss in this forum. Anything else?
No, although I still, so I don't know if Andrew told you, but my Gmail got hacked. So I've been out of my Gmail for almost 2 weeks now, which includes like my drive and everything. And it's really,
Oh my God.
it's like really driving me nuts. I've had so like everybody back up your stuff, I guess is the
I'm gonna change my password right now.
it's awful.
That's a
But
nightmare.
hopefully they're gonna. There's like a freeze period. So now I'm almost done with the freeze period. But anyway, so I don't have the latest report from the finance people. So I wasn't sure if you guys were able to get the ad in Flagpole.
Yes. I just got the receipt right before I left today, but the total was $159.38.
Okay, good, because I was like, oh, I don't know. I wanted to make sure it happened, so I'm glad to. Thank you for taking care of that.
Sure.
So that's all I have.
Can one of y'all repeat what, Andrew, you covered it in the beginning of the meeting, but the budget that was approved and just specifically the amount around arts and community awards?
Yeah, our operating budget is going from 21 to 41,000 a year. This year moving forward on a continuous basis. Our capital budget, we didn't ask for it. I just noticed it right before this meeting. In the budget draft that the mayor and commission approved last week. And so our capital budget is going from 25 to 40,000 a year, not on a continuous basis, just 1 year only. We should expect, or it's written, that it'll be 25 again after this upcoming fiscal year. Now we should maybe make the request that it remains so. Okay,
I think
nothing
we
else.
talked about doing the arts and community, they would go up to 5K each.
5K each, and we would do 6-ish of those. 6 was the target, but
6 was the
even
target, but I think with everything else,
website
it went to 5.
website development needs, other needs, right? So 6 was initially the target. 5 probably makes sense. Okay, that's it for the chair and the treasurer. Although if somebody with Darcy's identification presents themselves as the treasurer with all the information they stole, don't believe them. They're lying. Okay. Projects? I was asked to include 2 things I know nothing about on the agenda, and specifically Tallahassee Bridge and Bishop Park Pool. I put them on the agenda. I have no idea what they pertain, so I'm going to mute myself, and somebody who does, please speak up.
Yeah, that wasn't a weekly, or not a weekly, yeah, a weekly report. I think those are just going to be 2 new oncoming projects, but I don't have any other info about them. But since Tatiana couldn't be here tonight, Stephanie, were you gonna report about projects, or are we just gonna?
They have, those 2 projects don't have user groups or anything set up. They're just coming online through fiscal year. And so we'll start seeing that added to the schedule. And other than that, we have the Music Hall of Fame plaques are ordered. And we're picking out the spots for the new plaques with TPW this week. The ad will run next week in the flagpole, which I can, which I paid for today. Montu Miller is going to announce the new inductees for the Athens-Clarke Walk of Fame from the main stage at AthFest on Saturday night at 7:45 p.m. Something like that.
7:45 is what I remember.
7:45 p.m. So that will be at AthFest, the announcement. And the ad will just say, come to the main stage and listen to the 5 new inductees announced. The Firefly user group had a meeting, and they're working on their establishing those 2 locations and the types for approval. The Greenway call has come together with the SWAS staff, and the arena, there's an arena meeting coming up where they're going to look at the budgets and the calls drafts. So Ellie Swinson, who is working on the maintenance research report, has given us a summary of her research up to now. So she only just sent it late today, so I haven't had a chance to look at it, but we can offer that as her preliminary report. And then if people would like to have a separate meeting, we can coordinate that for a presentation that she would like to make of all of her research. She's waiting on a few things to make a more complete research presentation. So
yeah, I would love it if that internship could culminate in a presentation that we're invited to.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like we can have a one meeting where y'all can see where she's at and then offer feedback, and then she can take that and like expand on it through the end of her month, so that if there's more things you'd like to see, she has time to add them to before the end, so we can schedule those. And she can also, I mean, we can make it so that she can present if necessary, you know, when it works for everyone. So we'll put that together with her and send out a doodle poll.
All right, that's it for projects. Arts and Community Awards, Madeline.
Yeah, thanks Stephanie for covering for that. So yeah, we might need to talk about some of these things next month when Tatiana's back, because some of the notes I put in here were things she had wanted to talk about. But I can try to fill in the dots. So the 2 new awardees were announced last week for our spring 2022 cycle. Tatiana says all the paperwork is complete, press release is out there, it's on social, and actually one of the events happened yesterday. So the Athens-Clarke Society hosted a storytelling event yesterday, 2 different presentations, which is great, at the Morton Theater. And then the second awardee is from Queer Arts Athens, and they're hosting Professor Q's Quorum of Quintessential Queers, a Queer Cabaret, which is just a really fun name, which is a performance-based event. It's going to have a lot of different artists. It's really awesome, and that's going to be Thursday, June 30th at New Cheese Space. So all those details are in the newsletter, the most recent newsletter Tatiana sent out. So as we talked about, we've got 5 awards of 5,000 planned for fiscal year 23. This award program has been around since 2016, and it's, you know, one of the commission's sort of core activities now. We're doing it every year. We've committed to 2 cycles. Maybe the award amount has changed or the award numbers have changed, but I think it's fair to say it's one of our core activities to support the artist-led and community-led creation of art and culture events in town. So we've really improved this process over the last couple of years to make things more clear and objective and repeatable, creating a lot more documentation that didn't exist before a couple years ago, or not that we could really find. So this includes standardizing the request for proposal language, so we can just update it, as well as standardizing the application format. So what we used in the last draft, or the last round rather, that's based on some work a version of the committee did like about 2 years ago, and I think it was the first cycle of 2020. So it's made it a lot easier to execute. It's also made it a lot easier to score. We adapted our scoring system to be a lot more objective, working off of a model that the Georgia Council for the Arts uses. So it's gotten a lot better in a lot of ways, in that it makes it a lot easier for any commissioner, new or more experienced, to be able to understand the process and contribute, but it also makes it a lot easier for artists and community members to apply for it and understand how it works. But I wanted to talk about the idea of the committee structure, because we don't really have like a defined committee for this. It's not something that's in our bylaws. Like outreach is, I think in our bylaws, is this is a committee, it meets all the time, and here's what it does. And I was wondering if that is, something we should consider, just formalizing it into a committee, and just kind of clarifying, I guess, the process, and just in a way that we can, just rely on in the long term, so we don't have to, risk going back to the undocumented version of things we had a couple years ago, and also just getting more voices involved. I just happen to have been, this is where my professional experience is, and I just love this kind of work. And we've had a couple of people who have been really consistent volunteers in this, which is awesome. But it has been really the same 3-ish of 11-ish people who've been participating in the last couple of rounds. And I'm wondering if, whether it's a formal committee or just a different way of, planning what timelines or whatever it is, if there's a way we could get, just ensure that more voices from the commission are involved in this. I mean, I think in an ideal world, to me, it would be great if, say, like half of the commission could serve on the spring round, and then maybe the other half is the fall round, or something like that, to ensure that it's being a little bit more spread out, so that we can get more voices involved. We can really share knowledge about the process so that it doesn't, so that, you know, that knowledge of how to run the process, being like the committee chair, which I've informally been for the last couple of years, that doesn't just fall away. That knowledge doesn't just fall away when people cycle off. And there are also some kind of task specific things that I think it would be helpful if there was something a little bit more like a committee that could help to support Tatiana in doing, like getting a page on the new website and figuring out what's all the info that could be on that page, and to make this process even better and better documented. So I kind of want to throw that idea out there of, like, you know, we're doing all this work to make this process better. What would be the best way to ensure this lasts in the long term, and just continue to make things clear and get more people involved. Yeah, that's my open question for everybody.
I'm a process person too. Sorry, I don't know.
No, go ahead. You go.
I'm a process person too, so anything that would bring more structure and that would leave a record for more people to follow and have information on, I'm all in favor of. I like the idea of splitting it into 2 different seasons, I guess is how we do it. That way the work doesn't fall all on one group for the entire thing. But also I'm new, so I have no idea what this all takes, so.
Now that, I mean, really like 2 years ago and kind of tweaking it since then, we've really done a lot of the work to get this process down, I think, but we're always open to evolving it and, you know, just making it better. But I will say, in case this helps to figure out like how a committee structure could work, or how do we determine who's going to volunteer for what Tatiana has suggested for fiscal year 23 is, if we're going to have 2 rounds, open the call in for the fall awards, open that call in July, so really just as early as we possibly can, for any fall events, and then for any spring events, let's plan to open that in January. So really just getting ahead of it, and I think that sounds pretty reasonable, July and January. Let's see. So yeah, they're pretty spread out. I'll say the involvement as a volunteer, it depends on how many. Hold on one second. I'll just read what Dee Dee says here. As this program has grown, it would be interesting to invite previous award winners as a part of the selection committee, providing a broader and experienced voice, as well as providing further professional development. So that would definitely make it more of, I guess, like a task force. I don't know if there's a precedent for something like that. That's like a standing activity. I don't know if there's any limit. Yeah, I would have some questions for maybe like Tatiana or a city attorney about involving members of the public in something that I don't know. Yeah.
I love the concept. Yeah, I like the idea of broadening it.
Yeah, me
The
too.
danger that comes to my mind is conflicts of interest. You know, if we're inviting folks from outside, is there enough assurance that they're not tied, not by name, because that's easy to spot, but is there any assurance that they're not tied to a project that applies? I love the idea of doing that like a task force and bringing others in. But also, do we want to keep this for ourselves? In my opinion, this is the most fun thing that we do. Who doesn't like voting to award money through a competitive process? Come on, y'all. Isn't that the reason why we're in this game? And so I also like the idea of you know, having a different committee. Maybe half our body does this in the fall, half our body does this in the spring.
I was going to add, actually, I'm just looking at the chat and Donna has exactly what I was going to say, which is since this is something that we do on a regular basis, I think to me, I agree with Madeline that it would make sense to have a standing committee take the lead in forming the bulk of the work. And I served on that committee with Madeline previously, and she did an amazing job standardizing the process and making sure that we have the right kind of language and the evaluation form moving forward. So I think there's a lot of work that's already being done that can be shared with future members. But maybe one way to do this is to have 4 members and to have 2 members serve on 2 consecutive periods. So 2 people would be rotating in, 2 people would be rotating out. In that way, there would be a little bit of a continuity, but also like a constant flow of people and be able to broaden the scope by inviting other members. So 2 members serving for 2 all members serving for 2 terms, but 2 people rotating in and 2 new people rotating out.
I think that's great. And again, it need not be just commissioners. It could be ex officio members. I think that's great. One thing that our bylaws will do, when we do have bylaws that serve our organization, and I've said this before, our bylaws now don't even mention SPLOST a single time. So that should tell you how useful they are currently. Once we do have functional bylaws, these kinds of things could be codified within our bylaws.
I think that makes sense. I agree. Since it's something we do all the time, it should just be a committee, not a task force. I do love the idea for sure of involving community members or past recipients in that process, but I'm not sure that that would be most appropriate with like a committee like this. So maybe we could sort of table that idea and try and find out like how that could work. Maybe if there's any precedent for anything we could look at that this group has done, or that just maybe other just other examples we could find of how we could make that work appropriately, or if not this, then maybe there's something else we could do to make that work in a different way. Ezra, I love that idea of just always having different people cycling in and cycling out, so that you get that continuity, but you also and perhaps SPLOST should be another standing committee. That's a great idea. That's just what Donna just put in the chat. Donna's our bylaw champion. I love it. Thank you for your guidance in that all the time. Okay, so if we, does anybody else have any other thoughts on the idea of like, let's formalize the Arts and Community Awards as a committee?
I think it's a good idea.
Cool.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I do want to ask the question of, if you could go over it again, what purpose do you see the previous awardees, what do you want them to contribute to the future process?
I think Dee Dee, if you want to unmute and talk, I mean, I can share my opinion, but I think it's a good personal, professional development opportunity for folks. So yeah, Dee Dee, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, it was just about professional development, because these are people that in many cases are getting their first award, their first time at making a proposal. And once they've completed the project, their first time of writing a final report, and then what happens to them? What is your relationship with them? And now you have many people who fall into these categories at this point, what with the resiliency funding as well. And I'm just thinking these are a really good cohort for ACAC, and that it would encourage further development in the professional arts administration field. And as a person like you all, or especially Madeline, we sit on a lot of committees. I'm a maker and I sit on committees, and it does enhance my understanding of this whole process. So it would basically be professional development. That's what I would say. And then maybe eventually they would become commissioners.
Well, correct. And, you know, I want to just dangle this thing that happened at the retreat out for this idea as well, and that it fits very nicely in the question, what does ACAC do for the artist community? So as long as they are talking about their experience and how rewarding it was for them and what they learned about it, I think that's a great idea. It builds capital for us too.
Yeah, and I think it's also, I mean, this is really like a mentorship opportunity, I think. And even if I agree with what Kent sent in the chat, we would definitely want to check with the attorney's office to make sure we're following all the policies and guidelines and whatnot. But even if, I don't know, I could see a world where even if they weren't helping to like vote on the decision or the outcome of the awards, maybe they could still at least shadow the opportunity and learn how it works and what is it like to be on the other side of that conversation, you know, not being the one who wrote it, but being the one who is reading it. So yeah, I like the idea of looking at that through a professional development and mentorship lens. I wonder if there's a way we could make that work. And I know that's been an express need of the community from like the Create Athens priorities, mentorship opportunities, apprenticeship opportunities. Those Create Athens meetings haven't been happening the last year, unfortunately, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there was much progress made in that specific priority action related to it. But anyway, I know it's something that was made a priority action that was brought up because enough people in the community expressed the need for it. So I think if there's a way we can make that work, maybe with this or maybe in another way, that it would be really great to sort of formalize how we can develop artists on an ongoing basis in addition to the workshops that the Arts Division is putting together, like the one in August, which is going to be amazing. So let's see. The other points I wanted to share about that, and then we can move on, are, let's see, if we are going to target to publish the next call in July, we will want to establish, I guess, the next committee in the next couple of weeks. We'll want to establish it in the next couple of weeks. And let me see, what else did I want to share? Is the question about the budget, that's finalized, it's for sure happening, or is it still in a draft phase with the Mayor and Commission? Do we know?
My assumption is last week's vote was it.
The
Or was
final
it,
vote,
was
okay.
it 2 weeks ago? I don't know.
Okay. So yeah, the other thing Tatiana wanted me to share
Since
is
the fiscal year starts in 3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the other thing Tatiana wanted me to share is that I think, and Stephanie, you might be able to speak into this, but contracts will be required for awards that are over 2,500. So we are talking about doing double of that, so contracts would be required. And this, if we get ahead of it in July, we'll be fine. But just so everyone's aware, when we have to do those contracts for this award amount, it is going to add about a month to the processing time, and that does not include the contract drafting time. So it will be really important to stick to this new schedule, which I think will be really easy to do when we're this far ahead of it, right at the top of the fiscal year. And there may be, I don't know, Stephanie, if you want to share anything now, or we could just circle back with Tatiana or the city's attorney's office later, but there may be, if we are going to have to use these contracts, there may be more guidance and limitations about what can and can't be funded, just based on how the nature of the contract works. So
yeah, there'll be a more the city attorney's office can speak to that. There will be insurance. There will have to be voted on by the mayor and commission, and they'll also have to all be contracts signed by the mayor. So all of that processes will add into the timeline for your art and community awards.
There'll have to be insurance, but if it's over 2,500, basically.
I don't know why it has to have insurance, but it will.
Okay, insurance voted on by mayor and commission, and then signed by, yeah.
And the mayor and commission will have to vote on each and every selected awardee. So you'll have to present to the mayor and commission. They'll vote. Then when they're approved, they'll go to the mayor's office for signature, and then we'll go through the insurance process before the money is meted out.
Okay. So that is a big update.
Are there still restrictions like our last call? It could only be performance. Is that restriction
That's a
still in
question
place?
that the attorneys will have to answer.
Okay. How do we get an update on that? Should we reach out to them? Do we wait until they join one of our meetings?
That is a good question. I think they will reach out.
Okay.
I
There
have
we go.
shared with them the previous contracts, and I will, yes, I assume they will be in touch with us.
Or I can contact them with Tatiana, because I would love to continue to chair this at least for one more round before we can maybe cycle it. And then Donna asked in the chat, is this process different than what we've been doing with the ASCA? Stephanie, please correct if I'm wrong, but I don't think in the past we've had to have insurance or have projects voted on by mayor and commission. So that would be new, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Since it's a longer process, is there a benefit to just, having it all go out at one time and then spread them out throughout the year? Having the call go out so that people can get it in and then we have this longer time period? Like, I'm just wondering, instead of having 2 rounds, I'm thinking, gosh,
And they
You know,
can
and-
select which one they want.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're looking at insurance, just the contracting part and the approval by the mayor and commission, at minimum, that's adding 2 months from application to the committee determining the awardees to getting started on the project. A minimum 2 months. We've seen it take 4 months to get a one-page contract. I hope that doesn't happen again. But if we're starting something in January and it takes 4 months, it's May or June, and if the requirement is that the projects be completed within the same fiscal year, that makes a January start potentially unfeasible.
Mhm. So yeah, there's definitely pros and cons either way, but if this, I think that this process is going to have to be prioritized over, like, I think in an ideal world, it would be great if we could do, here's a call in, July, here's a call in January, because there are just going to be new ideas that people didn't know about before. And it's going to take a little while for people in the community to get used to this new, much more limited calendar. And I think that would be great, but I hear what you're saying, and like that it's going to really push it up against the end of the fiscal year. So, it's, pros and cons either way. So would the best thing to do be to, and I can lead this, I'd be happy to, but circle back with the attorney's office specifically, and Tatiana specifically, on what are the contract limitations, and I guess just getting, like, for sure in writing clarity, the project has to be completed by the end of that same fiscal year. Because if that, just in case that was not the rule, if the funds could still just be dispersed, but if the project would happen, slightly into the next fiscal year, then that would relieve that pressure valve. I think that would be fine. But it sounds like that probably is the rule. So.
Well, this is Kent, and that I can contribute to that. It really depends on, excuse me, your funding source. If you're using capital funds, there's more flexibility for rolling things over. But you're talking about using your operating dollars, and operating dollars do have to be concluded by June 30th of each year. There is no rollover in that regard.
So I wonder though, if the funds are dispersed, the funds are typically dispersed before the project is complete, right? So if the funds are dispersed before the end of the fiscal year, but the project itself is not complete until a little bit after that fiscal year, is that still okay? Or is that not okay?
No, they will not. And this is going to be part of what the attorneys will talk to you about, is that basically we can't distribute funds for a product or result we've yet to receive.
And typically, this is Diana. So speaking from the SPLOST standpoint, typically we hold the last payment until they've issued their release of liens and their final report. and stuff. And so, which includes all the O&M requirements and everything. So we won't issue that until we have all that final product.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it has worked differently in the past, and maybe that wasn't the right way that it was supposed to work. But I do believe, like, so for example, with the round of 20, I believe those funds were issued, and then some of the projects happened after, and so maybe that just was not the appropriate way for it to move forward. But so anyway, that's why this is sounding like it's new to some people, because it's just a little new. So can a second call go out? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that initial round, I think at that time, first of all, it was a smaller amount at 2,000, but also I don't think anybody envisioned it was during COVID. It was trying to help and support local artists during COVID. And I don't think anybody, especially the attorney's office, realized it may be an ongoing program. And now that the program is perhaps here to stay, the funding is being increased, it's drawn more attention to it. So they want to make sure that we're meeting all the right parameters.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think that's all part of just making sure this can be, survive in the long term.
Maybe
Donna?
spring cycle doesn't work with all of those new requirements though, right? So maybe we should reconsider the award amount for a spring cycle that might not need mayor and commission approval, which that alone adds 2 months.
You may need to wait to speak to the attorney's office so that you can fully understand, or because I can't convey that accurately now, what those amounts are. That may be something we understood that is no longer the case. So I don't want y'all to reconfigure your amounts and then that also not reach the goal you're trying to go for.
I hear what you're saying though. So it could just be a possible way to move forward is maybe the fall round that it does need all of this extra. It needs the insurance, it needs XYZ. If it is contingent on the amount, if it's lower and we don't need it, then maybe that could just be Arts and Community Awards Express. And that's in the spring essentially. And then the fall version is those are bigger award amounts. And it's going to take several months more from the mayor and commission getting the contracts drafted up. So it could be a yes and rather than a, cutting something.
Right. And maybe the fall is capital and the spring is programmatic events. Again, we're kind of redrafting the whole thing. So we might as well get it as inventive as we can within the limitations that we have.
I don't think we have capital projects for these.
We have small murals. We have we've even had small works of sculpture. At the $5,000 award amount, it was my hope that would yield more physical things.
I think that's just going to be one of the questions we have to ask the attorney's office about. Does that even count as capital? Because to me, commissioning an artwork like that is different than, I know we've gotten explicitly in the past guidance, like we cannot purchase speakers that will be reused at XYZ event. Like that kind of capital expense. I don't know what the interpretation is. Is that the same thing as a mural or a sculpture? But we can add that. So maybe I can lead ask, getting answers to these questions by next month's meeting, or hopefully before next month's meeting. And Andrew, I guess you and I can just hash out exactly what we would like to ask. So like clarification on, is this contingent on the amounts, or is this just the way any amount would have to move, even if it's $500 or something, how it would have to move forward. And then that should inform that'll inform the timeline, probably starting in July. Maybe it would have to be August at this point, but
Yeah,
and
sure.
I was just going to add it. Oh, and I was just going to add, I think somebody else mentioned this before, but if these are some of the restrictions that we can't work around, I wonder if it would make sense to do the awards once a year at the very beginning of the fiscal year, as opposed to twice a year.
Yeah, so I think ideally what we can do is we'll get the information we need this month. I'll take the lead on that. And then it may just be that we need, if we can get all these answers, we can just vote on what's the path forward going to be, will the funds be shaken out through the year or not. And we should be able to decide that next month. Okay. I think that's all I had, except for the only other thing related to this. It's definitely second tier to when can it all go out and how is the process going to go, but identifying the themes in advance, since that's the direction we've gone in the past couple rounds, and we seem to like that. We'll want to talk about, is that something we want to continue doing? I think there's artistic value in that. There's like storytelling value in that for sure. And we'll just want to talk about what that could look like. And I think that will probably be determined by how the timing, how the funding and the limitations, how that develops the timeline, and then how that is going to affect which committee, who makes up the committee. And I think we could discuss the themes from that level, if that makes sense to everybody. Okay. That is it for Flowers and Community Awards. Thanks for hanging on. That took a lot more time than I anticipated. So thanks, everybody.
There's a lot more to talk about than we thought. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Does it make sense to wait beyond the beginning of the fiscal year? I'm not sure. More information from the attorney's office will inform that. Okay, so next section, old business. I know Tatiana's not here. Is there any update on the plaques? We discussed that in November, that, when we even earmarked $18,000, we took a vote on that in November. At what, like $300 each, that would be what we would need times 60. Has there been any progress or any updates on that?
On the Music Walk of Fame plaques?
No, the plaques for all of the works that we've commissioned that have no marker, no artist attribution, no funding source. For example, all of the bus shelters.
I don't have an update on that at this time.
Okay. And then the other thing that we've never really clarified is what percentage of time is the public art coordinator expected to spend on behalf of ACAC? Our understanding was 50%.
So that's a conversation that we're going to have at another time, because that's not appropriate discussion for this format.
Can we get an indication on when that would be? Because if that's been unresolved for 15 months, I don't really want to wait any longer.
That will be something that we'll have a conversation about with as the city attorneys join the conversation.
Well, Andrew, I would like to reach out to you soon, very soon, and let's maybe set up a time to talk about that. I understand your desire to find out that information, and it'd probably help everybody if we can have that discussion, but I don't know that we need to have it in this format.
Okay. Yeah, please, I would be receptive to that outreach, so I'd be happy to set that up if you can.
Okay.
Okay, Madeline, ball's back in your court for outreach.
Oh boy. All right. Here we go. Okay, so just status update. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. So yeah, we're going through sort of our own little mini strategic planning process with the outreach team. Kimberly and Jesus have joined, so we have several more people than we did before, which is awesome. We've been holding down the fort with a very small group, so we're really excited that Kimberly and Jesus have joined us. And Jesus was actually able to join our last meeting. What was that? A week and a half ago. Yeah, and if anybody else would like to join, or at least get copied on, emails or whatever, just let me know. But we do meet the first Wednesday of the month. So yeah, we meet the first Wednesday. But we are still working on our purpose statement and priorities. We are sort of just in the feedback status on that, but just to give you an idea of where we are right now, the 3 focus areas that we've talked about so far, and this is subject to change according to whatever how it can fit in with the broader scope of what the whole commission is doing over the next year. So we're kind of talking about the fiscal year 23 as the scope of what we're talking about here. But the 3 sort of areas, and I shared this at the retreat, but is 1, to improve timely and accurate access to public information about ACAC's work. 2, to increase attendance, diversity, engagement at public events. And 3 is to build local and regional partnerships to better advocate for public access to and funding for cultural sites and activities. So that is where we left it off. So we are just in that feedback process right now. If you want to be a part of it, let me know. The other big thing I wanted to talk about that I forgot to put on the actual agenda, but is volunteering at Athfest. We reached out to Athfest about having a table as an official part of the Athfest market. And that's an option, but there are some that would require some funds. We do also have a opportunity to table in a location that would be free, but it would be about a block away from the artist market. But I think either way, we do want to commit to having a table manned, I think, for as much of the weekend as possible, so we can impact the most people and connect with the most people. But my suggestion is to really focus on Saturday, which it's always going to be the busiest day of the event. That's also the day that Montu is announcing on behalf of ACAC the new Music Walk of Fame inductees, and that I have in the notes, it's at 7:50, not 7:45, so 7:50 on the main stage on Saturday night. So I would suggest we could, if the way I drafted it out is if everybody, or if all of the volunteer shifts were 2 hours, that would cover, the duration of the event from like Friday it's 5 to 10, Saturday it's 12 to 10. So if we had 2 people, 2 volunteers in 2-hour shifts to cover the entire event, we would need 20 total volunteers, which is more than the members we have. So if everybody took 1 shift. So that's why I'm thinking we might need to either have people double up and take more than 1 shift, which I don't know if we have bandwidth to do that, or we could just focus on maybe just one of those days. Again, I would suggest Saturday, since that's our big announcement day. But yeah, looking at 2 volunteers at a time so that you can take a restroom break or a heat break. It's going to be hot. And just so that we can, just better connect with more people by having 2 people rather than 1 person at the table. Let's see. So yeah, I've created a doodle poll to get people's availability. And I went ahead and just made it for the whole weekend. So if you want to just select, if you are available, just select any of the times that you're available. You're not committing to every single time that you select, but I can send that out after this meeting. And if you could fill that out, anybody and everybody is welcome. We would love to get as much of the event covered as we can. And let me just give a little more clarity about the 2 location options. So the Athfest official, we'll call it option, there would be a cost associated. I don't know what sort of operating budget we have left for the year. But Andrew had also volunteered to cover that cost, at least for one of the days. Andrew, I did share in the email in our thread about it earlier. Just for Friday alone, as a part of the official Athfest Artist Market, we would be sort of just outside the market, but near the whole street stage. That would be $150. Saturday is completely full, so we would not be able to participate in the official Athfest tabling market that day. And Sunday would be an additional $200. So it's pretty steep, but it would be part of the market, a little bit more, tied with the arts market. The other option is utilizing the end of the driveway next to Ted's Most Best. It's technically Creature Comforts, and I have provisional approval. It's not final, but that would be a space we could utilize. Be right next to the main stage, so right next to where the announcement is being made, and it's only a block away, but we could save some funds. So it's definitely, I think either way is fine. I don't know what budget flexibility we have. Yeah, are there any preferences between those 2? Andrew, I know you were saying you would prefer if we could be in the official sort of space up by Hall, but I don't know if that's cost prohibitive.
Now that I've heard the full picture, other than via email, I no longer feel so strongly about being official. Since Saturday's not an option in a more efficient capacity anyway.
I agree. That's
yes,
what
I am willing to pledge the funds, but there was an if statement there, and that was if the intern is depleted our operating budget, which I don't have a full picture of. So
Well, we do have this option to use this driveway for free. It would be shaded and it would be next to the main stage. So I think it will work. So cool. So we'll plan to do that. I will send out.
Wait, what are we planning on? Just Saturday.
Oh, sorry. Maybe I shouldn't make that decision. The Saturday option is a better choice for us, Donna says. So yeah, are we okay with I mean, this isn't an official vote, I guess, but does anybody have any feedback on, no, let's avoid Saturday, but pay for the spot to be a part of the actual market versus utilize the free spot where we could do, some activation on Saturday?
Take the free spot.
Take the free spot. Okay.
Today we're getting stage time already, right?
Okay,
For the
great.
inductees announcement.
Spot, right.
Okay, awesome. All right, I agree. I just didn't want to make the decision on my own. So yeah, I'll fill out, that's what we're gonna do then. We'll use the free spot. I'll let you know if anything changes with that, but I will send out the doodle poll. Saturday is definitely the priority, but if we can have people on Friday or Sunday, we might capture, different audiences. So do put in all your availability if you can, but you're not committing there. You just let me know what you're available to do, and then I'll circle back. If we can fill that out really by Wednesday or so, Wednesday, Thursday, that would be great. And then I'll send out sort of the slot assignments this weekend. And I think that is all. Yeah, that's all we need to share with the full group, I think. Oh yeah, well, here I had an idea for a promotional material. Unfortunately, we don't have any promotional materials ready to go, like stickers or t-shirts or something like that. We don't have that ready yet, but I had an idea. If we're okay with this, we could utilize something like, and I can talk about this via email, but I just want to share, we might need some crafting help. Since we're really focusing on the Athens Music Walk of Fame announcement that weekend, a pretty cheap, I mean, I really think $30 would be sufficient. We could make printed fans that have Athens Music Walk of Fame. Not the awardees announce their names, because we want to get these out the whole weekend before the announcement on Saturday, but we could, sort of promote the Athens Music Walk of Fame and the map, the information we already have, and have like the logo on it, link to our website or something like that. So it'd be something that is promotional, people can walk away from it, and it's also a fan that will hopefully be helpful on this very hot weekend. So that's just an idea.
I think that's great. Who doesn't like a handheld fan at AthFest? The misting tent combined with a fan might be enough to cool us all off.
So yeah, when I send out maybe the notices for the slot assignments, I probably at that time will ask for some help, who wants to get together with some popsicle sticks and glue sticks and make those. But I think I can handle that. And then other than that, we'll have at the table the promo materials we already have, possibly a bus shelter pamphlet if Helen has that ready. Well, she does. That's awesome. And yeah, we've got the rest of it. And I'll lead putting the kit together, and I'll lead putting the kit together and all that stuff. Make sure we have what we need. So yeah, look out for my email after this meeting, and then again at the end of the week. Thank you.
Paint sticks. That's a good suggestion. Those will be free at Home Depot. Okay, internship update we already got, so we can fly past that. Why don't we? Oh, strategy team. Oh my gosh.
Hold on, I have a question about the internship update. Stephanie, did you say that there's a preliminary report that you'll share it with the group, and then from there we can arrange that meeting for feedback?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. I just want to make sure I heard that correctly.
Okay, strategy team. First of all, can anybody think of a better name?
Better name than what?
Strategy team. Do we need a better name?
Need a better name.
I think we need a better name.
Okay.
It's one of our two standing committees. I don't know. Madeline and I were discussing. Ooh, guitar pick shape. That's great. We were, although that's more crafting time. we were discussing, maybe that's not the best name in the world. Nobody's leaping at us with a better name.
Well, I'm trying to think. I really liked what Madeline was saying earlier, and I was just kind of catching part of it. But you were saying you have kind of your three purposes for your outreach committee. I think that's what we need for the current strategy. Like, what are the actual, purpose of this committee, and then maybe a name will arise out of that. I think it was an appropriate name for the last few months because we were looking at.
It seemed like it, and then we had a retreat, and then we met again. I was like,
yeah. So it's now it's like
this
what
name.
is needed, So I would love to see Madeline, and maybe you've shared it, but if you would share those three things that your committee, the outreach committee is, then it kind of helps me think through, well, what is the role of another committee? Is it operations, kind of bylaws? I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what we need.
Right.
I think that committee kind of ran its course, strategy wise.
Agreed. And we even discussed, does it make sense to keep meeting? And we decided yes.
Yeah, but then it's like, what for, other than maybe kind of organizing a work plan based off of the retreat. So now maybe it is kind of taking it to all of those task forces and committees and ideas, and then how do we begin to timeline? Then maybe we can do some of that work and present it back to the rest of this board. I don't know, but I'm a little stuck on that too right now.
I agree. We decided one of our work products should be a 5-year work plan because, our master plan had a pretty granular first 5 years, but guess what? Those 5 years ended a couple months ago. So maybe it makes sense for part of our work on the so-called strategy team to be a next 5 years work plan. That's premature, probably until we voted on spending priorities. We've got stuff to do for now. The thing I wrote down was our template for task forces, right? We can do that at our next. We can at least get started at our next meeting. And I'll facilitate that by email just so we all know what our homework is going into that. But if you guys have any suggestions on what our other post-retreat focuses should be for that standing committee, shout them out or reach out to us. Like, I'm great at coming up with things that outreach committee should be doing that I have no part of. If y'all want to reciprocate the favor, please do. ECAC 2028. Like it.
I like that.
Strategic planning, that's a good one too. Yeah, after we're planning to it, that doesn't sound so bad anymore. All right.
Or it may just be like a future, future.
Yeah, something that's future oriented.
Future visioning, the vision and strategy. Maybe it just needs a little more oomph.
I was thinking maybe steering committee.
Steering committee.
Steering. That's already a thing that exists in the world. That's great. That's a good one. Cool. Thanks for that. Anything else on this from the strategy team? Okay, so why don't we've gotten our internship update already. Why don't we close by what we usually do, arts happenings. What's going on in your universe?
I'm sure Judy has an update. You always have the best updates.
Hi. Yes, our summer shows open to the public this Saturday, June 18th, but we are having an artist reception. Woo! On Thursday, the 23rd from 6 to 8, and a number of the artists will be coming up to town. We're featuring 4 new exhibits, in the main galleries highlighting contemporary art in Georgia. Picture this is the triennial and the third version of this exhibit that I curate with the Georgia Museum of Art, and it features 11 different painters working with narrative subjects throughout the state of Georgia, and that travels to 6 other venues over the next 2 years. Upstairs we have a quilt show by Kathy and her daughter Coulter Fussels, and they work with subject matters of river mapping and rafting in fiber. And in the West Gallery we have a Works on Paper show by Robert Croker, who is a long-term Athenian, once a Dodd School professor, and was last visited here during Art Rocks Athens a number of years ago, as he was part of the beginnings of the art and music scene in the heyday of the 70s. So he will have an exhibit upstairs. And in our cases, we have Jason Matherly, who is a local artist who does shaped painted canvases. So we will have a reception that Thursday. Friday at noon, Robert Croker is going to be in the galleries talking about his work. And then towards the end of the summer, the Fussels will be discussing more of an academic type of lecture about the nature of quilting, and then a gallery talk the following day. And that's all on the website. So that's what's happening over here at this moment. Thank you.
I'm conducting a textile natural dye workshop July 9th and 10th at OCAP. And it's not a workshop to do anything other but to explore the creation of 9 different types of natural dye pots, and with several parameters to develop a portfolio of colors that you could get between or from different natural dye stuffs. It's really quite fundamental. So if you know someone that wants to participate in something like that, kind of academic, kind of nerdy, but it's all about textile dyeing, just let me know.
Is that it?
I think
All right.
so.
With no further happenings, that concludes our June meeting. So thanks everybody for your time and attention, and see you at the task force level. Okay, thanks everybody.
For the next meeting, online again, would we consider like all in person, or do we want to just wait until we can do hybrid, Andrew? I know we're just waiting on the part to be able to do that hybrid, but
the retreat, I don't think everybody was comfortable with fully in person, so hybrid seems like the way forward. Having a virtual option for people who are comfortable, or might be comfortable on a month-to-month basis.
Yeah, we just had to quarantine at my house because my mom tested positive, so it's still here. It's not going anywhere.
It's still here.
So our maybe our assumption is it's probably online unless there's a hybrid option, but we're not going to assume it's in person.
That depends on the Linden House's time frame for getting that equipment.
Right.
It's actually coming from ACC above, so that equipment will come when it comes. I don't have any timeline on that. It's outside the art division. So it's all in person or all online at this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Stephanie.
All right, that concludes us. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you all.